Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you are doing well. So today we are going to begin with a new lesson which is from trade to territory. So what we will learn in this chapter, let's see. So here do you see the subheading, the company establishes power. So in history, in this year, we are going to learn about how the East India Company came into force and how did it reach India. So in this chapter, we'll learn about how the East India Company, the company which was responsible for capturing the whole Indian subcontinent at that time, it came into existence in India. So in this chapter, what we are going to learn. So these are all the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. First of all, we'll see that East India Company comes to East, as in from Britain. It comes towards the East to India, and how did it establishes its feet in India. Then we will see how it begins their trade in Bengal, how the trade and mercantile began in Bengal. As we have discussed that since the East Indian Company establishes its feet in the Indian subcontinent in Bengal, there were a lot of battles that took place in order to conquer and deal with the revenue system. Then we will see how trades led to battles. So, as soon as the East India Company came to India, there were a lot of battles involving trade. So, what were those? Then we will see how Battle of Plassey and what was it and when was it taken place. Then we will see company officials, they become nabobs. We will see what is nabobs, where did this term come from, who were referred to as nabobs, we will see that. In the second part of this video, in the second part of this chapter, we will learn about the company rule expands. How did the East India Company manage to expand its rule and conquer different parts, provinces and states of India? Who was Tipu Sultan and why is he called the Tiger of Mysore? Then we will see war with the marathon. So what is it about? What was the war about? Then the claim to the paramount. Do you know what is a paramount? The top of a hill is known as a paramount. So there was always a competition with the East India Company to reach the paramount. So we'll see that. The doctrine of lapse. This is a very important topic in this chapter, which is the doctrine of lapse. We'll see and study this in detail. Then in the end, we will see setting up a new administration. So as the East India Company started to expand its administration, it needed a new structure to govern and administer its tasks and activities in the country. So we will see what was the new administrative policies. The company army, of course, to control such a big continent, such a big subcontinent, the company, it required an army. So how did the East India Company, it turned into an army? We'll see that. So let's begin. So to give you an overview, in the last classes, in the previous classes, in history books, you have studied that Indian continent, Indian subcontinent, it was not just ruled by one ruler. There were several dynasties which ruled the Indian subcontinent over a period of time. The last dynasty being the Mughal dynasty, the Mughal Empire. So, as you can see here, here is a picture of a Mughal emperor, Aurangzeb. So, Aurangzeb is known to be the last emperor or ruler of the Mughal Empire. So, after his death, after Aurangzeb's death in 1707, the Mughal governors, who were known as the Subedars, and the big zamindars, the people, the landowners, the big zamindars, they started to assert and rule on their own. So there was not one focal point who would supervise the whole administration or rule over the people. So these small powers such as the Subedars, the zamindars, they started to begin and assert their power and authority, setting up regional kingdoms which are small in nature. So some powerful regional kingdoms, they emerged in various parts of India after Aurangzeb's death. So Delhi could not function as an effective center since there was no head or center point to govern and administer. No one powerful focal point. These small people, they divided their kingdoms and these powerful regional kingdoms came into emergence. A new power named the British began emerging at that time. Of course, if there is no unity, not everybody, or if there is not one single power who could lead the nation, in that case, the power is divided and scattered. So, at that time, the Britishers, they started to come to India. Earlier, it was just for trade, but now they started to expand their political and social horizons as well. So now here in this slide, you see a picture of Bahadur Shah and his sons being arrested by Captain Hudson. So here is Bahadur Shah, who was one such powerful regional king, and he has been arrested by Captain Hudson of British East Indian Company. After the revolt of 1857 was put down, Bahadur Shah was put in prison. They all were put in prison, he with his sons, and they were executed. After Aurangzeb, there was no powerful Mughal ruler. There was not one ruler who had the power to guide the whole nation. So, what happened at that time? Mughal emperors, they continued to be symbolically important. However, there was not one ruler, but at the same time, there was a cultural and social benefit of which they were reaping fruits. So, they were still valued. So, as we studied that in the rebellion of 1857, there was a massive rebellion against the British rule in India. Bahadur Shah Zafar and his followers, his sons, they took the lead in this new rebellion. So, once the revolt was put down, the company, they arrested Bahadur Shah Zafar and his sons, and they were put into prison and executed thereon. So, here we see that how the British East India Company, the East India Company or the trade company of the Britishers, they came from Britain to India. So, now let's talk about that how did this British East Indian Company or the East Indian Company, it came to the east, it came to India. How did they reach India? So, earlier there were no planes that you can take a plane and go anywhere, right? So, they had to discover the route to India on their own. There were no maps, there was no Google Maps at that time, right? So, what was the discovery and how did they reach India? Let's see. So, here in the map, as you can observe, that the British East India Company, it came from the British Islands, the Great Britain. So, they came to India through a sea route, through the sea. They reached the Kappa of Good Hope, which is known as modern day Cape Town and St. Johannesburg in South Africa. After that, they moved towards the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, towards the Bay of Bengal, where they set up their ports in Madras and Calcutta. So, it was in Tamil Nadu and Bengal and their regional capitals respectively that they set up their first ports. After that, towards the Arabian Sea, they reached Bombay, which is in Maharashtra. So, these were the three major cities which were first conquered or approached by the Britishers. So, let's see further that how the East India Company, it established its roots into the Indian subcontinent and held that for 200 and more years. Let's have a look. So, in England, in Great Britain, in 1600, the rule was of Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, she was the Queen of England. So, in 1600, Queen Elizabeth, she issued a contract, a trade contract to the East India Company. Now, what did this contract mean? It was known as a charter by the monarchy or by the queen. What did this charter contain? What was the document about? Let's have a look. So, as you can see here that in 1600, the East India Company acquired a charter from the ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth I. So, what was there? Let's see. So, Queen Elizabeth, she granted the sole right of trading with the East to the East Company. Okay, so East Indian Company was the company who had the sole power or the monopoly to trade with the Eastern countries. That consisted all of Asia. So, under this, it meant that no other trade company from Britain or from any part of England, they could function, trade or they could merchandise with the East. So, with this charter, the company could venture across oceans. They could move across oceans, they could trade and sell their products, buy the products, etc. It could look for new lands. So, of course, this was an opportunity for discovering new domains of trade and for making money and profits. So, they could find new lands to trade. Apart from that, from them, it would buy products at cheap price. So, the main goal of this trade was that all these Asian countries, they have very good resources, natural resources in form of spices, gold, diamonds, etc. There were plenty of metals, plenty of semi-precious stones, etc., which were important. So this was a time for the East India Company as well as the monarchy, the Queen of England, the ruler of England, to take these products at a very cheap and reasonable prices and sell them at a very huge price in their continent to the people and earn huge profits. So the whole idea was to gain profits. The company, they did not have any fear of competition because it had the sole proprietorship or the sole monopoly of the whole trading market towards the east. Now, let's talk about mercantile. Whenever we talk about trade, what is trade? Trade is exchange of goods and services, isn't it? But what does it involve? So, mercantile is one term which is used for trade at that time as well. So, a business enterprise, a mercantile is a business enterprise, organization or institution that makes huge profit primarily through trade. That means buying of goods at cheaper price and selling them at higher prices so that they can book a higher profit margin. So, as you can have a look here, mercantile trading companies in those days made profit primarily by trading. So, it was not based on services of any kind, but it was only based on goods and commodities, the tangible items. For example, cloth, spices, semi-precious stones, metals, etc. So, they could buy these items, these products and raw materials at a very low price and sell them at a higher price. So, was the Royal Charter successful for the East India Company? Now the question comes in account that the Queen, it issued and it gave monopoly to the East India Company to have trade with the eastern countries. Now how was it beneficial and successful for the company? How did it act as favorable towards the company? Let's have a look. So, the Royal Charter, which was issued by the Queen, it was very successful for the East Indian Company. As we can look at the history, they ruled on India and many different countries in Asia for more than 200 years. So, why was it successful? Because the East India Company, it had the monopoly, it had the sole right to trade with the East and Asian countries. Other than that, other than East India Company, no British company was allowed or chartered to do trade. So, in that way, it gained every favorable outcome. So, but also there were some failures. So, there were few things that even the Europeans, they could not prevent. So, the British companies, the other British companies, they failed at entering the foreign markets towards the east because of this charter given to the East Indian Company. So, as we saw in the map, the British ships, they first shipped down towards the western part of South African continent. So, they reached the Cape of Good Hope, okay. So, they stopped there, they did their trade in Africa as well and they crossed the Indian Ocean. So, towards moving from the Cape of Good Hope, they reached the Indian Ocean. The Portuguese had already set up their presence on the western coast of India. So, as you know, Goa, which resides in the western coast of India, it was already a place where the Portuguese were trading. So, the doors were not open for Britishers to deal with the western coast of India as the Portuguese already reached there. There was a lot of competition as compared to that. So, what did the Britishers do? What new things did they find? So, Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese explorer, he discovered this sea route to India in 1498. So, now here we need to note an important date and the name of a important explorer. So, here we need to note some important information. Now, since the first ships, they sailed down towards the west, they reached the Cape of Good Hope, okay. Then they crossed the Indian Ocean. So, the first thing was towards the Cape of Good Hope. Then they reached the Indian Ocean. Okay, but there was a challenge. What was that challenge? That the Portuguese had already set up their presence on the western coast of India, which consists of mainly Goa, Kerala, etc. Okay, you can still see that there is a very rich Portuguese culture in Goa. Now, what after that? Vasco da Gama. was a Portuguese explorer who discovered the route to India first in 1498. Okay. So after that, by the start of the 17th century, the Dutch too, the Dutch people from Netherlands, they too were exploring the possibilities of trade in the Indian Ocean. Now why was that? Because Indian Ocean, the Indian subcontinent, was very rich in natural resources, and there were a lot of things that could yield huge benefits to people. So in the start of 17th century, the Dutch too started exploring the Indian Ocean. Now, soon the French traders also arrived. So it was not just the Britishers, there were people from other parts of Europe as well. The Portuguese from Portugal, the Dutch from the Netherlands, the French from France, and Britishers of course from the Great Britain. So what was the reason behind the attraction, as we discussed, that why these all the people, they wanted to come to India for trade? So what was the reason behind this attraction? Let's see. First reason is that there was cheap and fine quality of silk available. Not just silk but cotton also. As we have discussed that textile industry in India, it's quite renowned even in today's time. So the first main point of attraction or fascination towards the trade was cloth. Silk and cotton, they were present in the Indian subcontinent at a very good quality and cheaper prices. Apart from that, there were spices like pepper. Pepper is known as the black gold. Then cloves, cardamom, cinnamon, etc. These spices, these became the central goods for trading companies to buy and sell. Now, the competition among the companies resulted in. Now, of course, there were so many companies coming from different parts of the globe, different countries of the Europe. There had some kind of competition among them. So what was the competition? So the competition was among the European companies coming from different countries. So this resulted in rise of prices. So the prices of these commodities that they used to purchase from the Indian dwellers, Indian vendors, they rose. So it ensured that the Indian traders were also receiving a handsome sum of money for whatever commodities or goods they were trading in. This reduced the profits of the company. So it was the contrary or the opposite effect on the company. Since the prices rose, the profit margin reduced because again they could not increase the selling price ultimately. So the cost price increased, the profit margin decreased, and the selling price somewhere remained the same. So it was a loss situation for the companies. Now, amidst all these problems and the lack of profit margin that they were facing, there had to be a way for the companies to flourish. So they needed to find some kind of solution so that the East India Company could flourish and make huge profits again. So the only way the trading companies could flourish was elimination of the rival competitors. Of course, there were so many companies coming from so many different parts of the world. There was some part of the competition. In fact, there was a higher part of the competition. So what happens in today's time? For example, if I am selling bananas and just in front of me some other vendor is selling bananas at a very cheaper price, of course customers would go to him. So what can I do? Can I decrease my profit margin? I don't want to do that. So in that case, I would destroy my rival so that I have the monopoly and the only right to trade. So this is what the companies did. They started to eliminate the rival competitors. So this led to fierce battles. So as we were talking that the battles, a series of battles started. So what led was competition. So this led to fierce battles between different companies from different countries. So during the 17th and 18th century, they regularly sank each other's ships in the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea. So the battle did not include actually fighting in terms of with the weapons and everything, but it was a trade battle which included sinking of ships in the sea. They blocked routes, prevented rival ships from moving with supplies of goods. They used to block the roads or they used to block the shipways and the seaways so that the rival ships could not enter the port. Trade was done on with arms. Now this is important to note. Whenever there was a trading company making trade with the local and the native people, it was only done under arms so that it could not be looted, it could not be burgled by some rival competitor. Trading posts were protected through fortification. So the trading posts where the companies set up their warehouses or godowns, these were protected by fortification, like big walls were built so that everything could be protected. Now, conflicts of the companies with local rulers. So apart from that, there were also conflicts of these companies with the local kings and rulers. Let's have a look at that. The effort to fortify settlements and carry on profitable trade led to intense conflict with the local rulers, because of course if some foreigner or some person who is not a native, he is coming to India, to your land, and building forts, that does not reflect good on the ruling party. So what happened there? The company found it difficult to separate trade from politics. There was a huge politics involved. The rulers, the native rulers, the local rulers, they felt threatened by the company, and there were conflicts between them.